computer. All right, we're now officially recording. So hopefully Walter won't bother us too much. But I'm going to go over and share my screen. And I'm going to bring up pay no attention to that Marty Feldman thing over there. I'm going to bring up a couple of items here and show everybody what I have. Okay, and I'm going to get this down. I'm just going to go through a couple of my streak shots that I have used in the past and have been, happy with or shared and so on and so forth. This one here is one of the ones that I will be talking about tonight. And let's see, Power Media Player, I guess, is as good as any. And this particular shot is, I took this about 2 or 3 weeks ago when we had 2 launches on the same day. And one was at 6:29 in the morning. And that was the Atlas, okay? And that's this one with all the smoke going up like this. And then the other one was at 7:15 in the evening. And that was this one here, which was the Starlink shot from SpaceX.
Hey, Gordy, all we're seeing is your file explorer. If you've got it open in another program, we're not seeing it.
Oh, you're not seeing the Power Media Player?
No.
Oh.
All we're seeing is file explorer.
Oh, we can't do that then. Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can figure this out. Oh, I see why. Okay.
Change your share screen view.
Yeah, I know what's going on here. Hold on. Thanks for that tip. Okay, you can see it now, right?
Much better.
Much bigger. Okay. I have another program that I can put these in. I'm not too worried about that. But just for the introduction here, I'm going to talk about a couple little things. First one, like it was 6:29 in the morning, was this Atlas, and that's the one leaving the smoke trail. That's not really a streak shot in the classic sense. That's just a single shot, and the rocket happens to be leaving the smoke behind it because it had solid rocket motors on it. So that is kind of a single shot that there. Now I took multiple shots all along its trajectory, but I only used that one. The other one is the SpaceX shot, which here is a whole bunch of shots, and that was the SpaceX, and that was done at like 7:15 in the evening. The base shot, which is the sunrise, basically, I took just before I took the Atlas shot. And so one of the things you always want to remember when you're doing a streak shot is what is your base shot going to look like? And I like to take a base shot and get my base shot the way I like it, try and get my camera level. You should always remember you're using a tripod and get your base shot. And then what I do when I'm ready to take the streak shot is if it's the same time of day, I will drop it down 1 to 2, either 1/3 or 2/3 of a stop, so that the shots with the rocket going up are darker, okay? Because when I blend them in Photoshop, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the lighten mode. So the only part of the shot you will see is the rocket exhaust. That's why you want to get your base shot good in the very beginning so that you get that. Here's another one that I did, and I think this one was 89 shots that I layered together. So some of you folks probably have figured out already how you get a daytime shot is you don't just slap on a neutral density filter, open the shutter and leave it go. You take a whole sequence of shots that are properly exposed, layer them together in Photoshop, pick your base shot, and all the rest you blend with the lighten mode so that the only part of the other shots that come through are the rocket exhaust. And when you layer them all together into a single shot, you'll get all the rocket exhausts strung together in a sequence, and then you stop wherever you want to stop. Like at the very top here, you can see there's the rocket and it's available, visible, I should say. So that's how you get a daytime streak shot. That's the best way to do it. You can use a neutral density filter, but I find it also darkens the rocket exhaust, the streak that you're trying to capture, which kind of defeats the whole purpose. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit as we get into it. And that basically is the key to tonight's whole presentation. So if you're done, you can go about your business. You don't have to hang around. That's how it's done. But I'm going to show you a couple more, talk a little bit more about some other planning things and some other techniques. This shot here, I took the actual rocket launch streak shot when it was dark. And so I just opened the shutter, locked the shutter open, and took the streak shot. And it was 2.5 minutes or 2 minutes and 15 seconds or something, closed it. Then I hung around for 35 minutes for the sun to start coming up because I knew where the sun was going to come up. And I did a little light painting of the rocks. But basically, once the sun came up and I got that real nice orange glow behind the clouds in the sky, once in Photoshop, I just layered the streak shot, which had a completely black background, over the top of the others and used the light and blend mode. And so I wind up with the just the streak of the rocket against a much, much brighter sky. And that's why when you look at the brighter sky, which is the overall base shot, you see all these the heart shape and all these various things. That's all exhaust from the rocket as the rocket went by. But in the 35 minutes that I was hanging around waiting for the sun to come up, they got disturbed and blown all over. So it looks like random clouds. It's actually rocket exhaust. But the overall effect is, and you get the reflection in the water as well. The overall effect is you get to layer the bright streak over the top of the base shot. And that's one of the things that I always try and make sure everybody understands is taking a streak shot can be easy. Let's take this one. Here's a streak shot, kind of boring. It's big, it's a black background for all practical purposes. There's a little bit of reflection on the water and there's a rocket going up and that's that. There's really nothing else to give it context. There's nothing to give it interest. It's just a streak shot. So these are the ones that I try and avoid if I can by some planning, going out, finding the best foreground, finding something that's going to be interesting to give you the streak shot that you want to try and capture. A couple of the others here. Here was one I went over to Grills over at the Port Canaveral and took the base shot of Grills. And then when the rocket went up, I cranked the f-stop way up to a high number and dropped the ISO down. And I got just the streak shot that I layered over the top of the base shot, which was the foreground of Grills. And so you get an interesting shot with foreground and composure and everything else. So just like anything in photography, composure is a big part of it. And it's also planning. So planning is a big part of it. Let's see, a couple other things I might want to talk about, and I got these ahead of time so I could just go right to them. I'm going to go back to the one that, oh no, I'm going to use this one here. Here's a shot that I took up just over the Max Brewer Bridge as you go on to Cape Canaveral, the NASA part north of KSC. And you can see the rocket going up here, but you see that it just barely hooks and then it goes off into the distance. And that's one thing you want to watch is where are you taking the picture relative to where the rocket's going. And a lot of times you'll see me during Camera Club meetings, I'll talk about what's the azimuth of the rocket launch. And the reason I do that is because if you are straight behind the rocket when it goes up, you're going to see a streak go up and then turn into just a little bit of a dot as it flies away. You're not going to see any left or right arching of the rocket, as opposed to some of the other ones. For example, there's one that I took up north in a park, 6 lakes or 4 lakes, some number of lakes, many lakes, little lakes, some number of lakes up north near Mims. And I knew the rocket was going to the northeast, so I knew I was going to catch more or less the side view of the rocket and the streak. So that's how I got that. And then I light painted the bridge and the trees and everything. It gives you foreground, gives you interest, gives you some composure, and it comes together and gives you a nice streak shot. Let's see, a couple other things I wanted to point out. This I took behind my condominium, and this was just after sunset. And I don't know why I didn't go somewhere else. I think I might have had something going on, but this is another example of knowing what to expect and planning appropriately. So here's the SpaceX rocket going up. And after MECO, you see this little teeny hook. I don't know if you can see it on your computer, but there's a small hook right up at the very top right of the picture. That is actually the boost back burn. That's the lower first stage boosting back. And this was one that was coming back to land on Cape Canaveral. So there's the boost back burn, and the rocket actually went up like this. And then as it started to re-enter, there's the re-entry burn. So I knew the re-entry burn was coming, and I knew the exact time it was coming. They usually start about 6:40 after launch and burn out about 7 minutes after launch. And then somewhere around 8 minutes after launch, you have the landing burn. And so here's the landing burn as it came down to the landing zone on the Cape. And so by opening and closing the shutter and leaving the camera perfectly still, and again, using the lighten mode in Photoshop, when you blend them together, you get these multiple aspects of the mission. Now, I will say that this one here, because it was, my memory is fading a little bit here, it was in the neighborhood of 20 or so minutes, 15 to 20 minutes after sunset. This shot here is not just a single wide open shutter. It would have completely blown out the image because it was way too bright. So this was dusk. The sun had set, but just barely. So this is actually a sequence of, well, I don't know, I'd be guessing here, 50 or 60 shots going up. And then this here, and you can see a little bit of it, is probably 15 or so shots coming down, and here's another 15 shots here, all layered together to give you the streak. So the layering in Photoshop for daytime or not pure darkness shots is what gives you this effect. One of the things to remember there is as you layer them together, especially as the rocket starts picking up speed, you may get small little gaps in the streak after you layer them all together, and you just have to use a clone brush to fill in those little gaps. That can sometimes happen when you lock your shutter and your camera's taking these pictures and your memory card can't take the data fast enough. Your camera pauses for 2 or 3 seconds and then resumes. So that 2 or 3 second gap while your data is being read to your card translates into a gap in your streak. And so you have to be able to use the clone brush to kind of fill it in. So that's the nature of that particular shot. And also make a mental note where you see the red clouds here, then you see orange clouds, and this is exhaust actually. And then you go up here and you see the white, looks like feathers, that's exhaust as well. But you notice the difference, it goes from red to orange to white, and that translates to where in the sunset sequence you are seeing these clouds. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes as well. So let's see, I think I've talked about everything. Again, foreground is big, and I'm going to open one of these up here in Photoshop and show you something else that you need to watch for. Okay, all right. Does anybody have any questions so far? Are they following along the general concept of the streak shots during daytime? This one. Yeah, go ahead.
When you're planning your shot,
Yes.
Are these final shots, are these cropped in? Like how are you estimating, where your zoom level is versus like the apex of the rocket's curve and all that to make sure you've got the whole curve in there, but you're not so zoomed out,
Most of my streak shots I take it with my wide angle lens. I have a 16 to 24. it would be pretty rare for me. I'd have to be a long ways away. And I'll talk about that in a minute here, but I'd have to be a long ways away to use anything higher than, I'm sorry, it's a 16 to 35, to use anything higher than that lens. Generally 16 millimeters is what I use. If, well, I might as well talk about it now. What the heck, you got me started. Streak shots are real hard to do when you get closer, okay? So this particular shot by the lighthouse, that's a 16 millimeter shot, okay? And even at that, there was no way I was going to get it. But I'm also very, very close. I'm probably about 5 miles from the launch pad, 4 to 5 miles from the launch pad. And you say, wow, that's a long ways away. That's close, actually, for streak shots. So it'd be very difficult to get a streak shot much closer than this. This was completely planned because obviously the lighthouse and the keeper's cottage right there, I knew exactly where I was standing within a few feet to get this particular shot. And I knew the rocket was going to arch to the right. So all this stuff was pre-planned. And the exposure on this one, again, I went out there, set up my camera, got the composition the way I wanted it. And then I got the base shot. And like most shots, the lower the ISO, the better, as is a good rule, but not always. There may be times when you want to use 200 or 400 or 800 ISO, but for most of the time for a streak shot, you want 100 or something down as low as your camera will go. Now the base shot doesn't matter because you're just picking and making the best base shot you can. And there's going to be times when your base shot, in order, especially if you're doing it in and around dusk, you're going to need to bump your ISO up to get your base shot to look normal and natural. And then once you do that, then you can drop your f-stop to a much tighter f-stop, and also you can drop your ISO down because the brightness of the rocket is pretty significant, and you're going to use the lighten mode when you blend anyway. So let me talk a little bit, since you got me started on that. For nighttime shots, if I'm inside of 8 miles, I'm going to use 16 or 18 millimeters on my wide angle, and I'm going to have the f-stop set at about f18 or so. If I'm closer than 6 miles, it's going to be f20, but generally about f18. If I'm up around 8 or 10 miles, I'll go to f16. If I go above 10 miles, I might consider f14, something like that. So you want to get the shutter aperture closed down quite a bit because it's going to be a bright flame, especially the SpaceX rocket launches. For the daytime shots, just use your camera's meter, get your best meter here, darken it by 1/3 to 2/3 of a stop, and that becomes your setting. And then you can set, and if again ISO, let's see, you would probably use ISO 100, but I wouldn't say it's not a bad idea to go up to 400 or 600 or something to do that if it's going to change your shutter speed significantly. The longer you leave your shutter speed open, in other words, a whole bunch of shots at 125th of a second, means you're going to have fewer shots, right? If you're getting a shot like this, you're going to have fewer shots. If you change your ISO, bump your ISO up to 600 or something, and now you're shooting at a 250th or 320th of a second, you're going to get a whole lot more frames that you have to overlay in Photoshop or whatever you're using. So I try and keep my shutter speed as low as I can get it. And that usually translates to a pretty low ISO for the shooting of the shutter. And I talked a little bit about the f-stops based on distance, and those are for nighttime shots that I was talking about. So those are pretty much what you want to use for nighttime shots.
So for the nighttime shots, You mentioned, the F-20, the F-18, the F-16.
Mhm.
Is that ISO 100?
Yes. Oh,
And
yes.
then,
Mhm.
and then how long are we exposing for? Is that a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes?
Well, this one here, for example, hold on. Scott, can I call you back? Okay, bye. Son Scott. I don't like to just shut them off. So anyway, this one here, I was actually at work. I was the EOC director, and I brought my camera in, and when they said, T minus 15 seconds, I ran outside and tripped my shutter. So this one here, the shutter was open for this entire part where you see the orange, and then right about here, I closed the shutter and reopened it again. And then the continuing part was the next exposure. So generally, again, I'm talking SpaceX, their main rocket burns out at about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So 2.5 minutes is when you're going to lose that. Second stage went, and depending on what you're going to get, you're going to get the second stage give you just as good a show as the first stage. You could leave it open for 5 minutes if you want, or 4 minutes, if it's dark enough at night. Again, if you're well past astro twilight, you can leave it open the whole time. Just be aware that as you start, if the stars are bright enough, you're going to get star streaks along with it. But that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. Let's see if I answered your question on that one. I think so. I am going to, this is actually a good shot here to talk about. Does everybody know why this is orange going up and then it turns into white as it starts heading down range? Does everybody know why that happens?
It's launching into sunlight.
Correct. Here's another example. I took this one out. This is along US 1 near Titusville. It launches up and the first stage burned out, finished up, the second stage lit, and off it went, and it's going into sunlight. So anytime you're just prior to sunrise or just after sunset, it may look dark where you're shooting from, but the rocket is launching up into the sunlight. So let me do this. Let me go to another little thing, and this, I whipped this up this afternoon just to kind of show everybody. This is the Earth looking straight down. So that little black dot is the North Pole. And this over here, most people can guess, that's the sun. And this over here on the right is the shadow of the Earth, okay? This little black thing is your rocket. That little thing that looks like a wick is actually your rocket's flight path, okay? So as you look down, you're going to see the Earth turn, kind of, sort of. And so just before sunset, you're still going to have the sun lighting the rocket, okay? Everybody sees that? And then as you go into sunset and go into twilight, the rocket is going to pitch into the shadow of the Earth, and it's going to be dark or black. Meanwhile, the flight of the rocket is up here in the daylight. And so it's not until a significant time after the launch that your flight is completely in the shadows. And I don't have a good number for that. That will vary on the launch depending on the azimuth, if it's going northeast, if it's going straight east, if it's going southeast, is it in the wintertime, is it the summertime, all those things come into play. But just be aware, and as you extrapolate this out to coming up on sunrise here, so just before sunrise, kind of like that picture I showed you before, you're going to see that the rocket flies up into the sunlight, okay? You can see here how the sunlight lights the flight path of the rocket, and it's not until close to approaching sunrise that you begin to see the actual rocket itself on the pad or at very low level. Okay, does everybody kind of follow that? If that wasn't neat, how is that for animation, guys? But that's the gist of it. That's the reason why, and it's self-evident if you think about it. And if you see this little demo here, that's the reason why a lot of times you'll see the rocket at night. It'll be dark and black, and yet you'll see the exhaust light up white. And a lot of times with the SpaceX launches, it looks like a polywog or something. That's because the way the rockets separate and the exhaust of the maneuvering motors and all that are in the sunlight. But yet you're down there in the dark, and the rocket was in the dark when it took off. So anyway, that's the reason for that. Okay, let's see what else I was going to do. I was going to go to Photoshop. And I was going to open a file. And I was going to open where did I put it? There it is. I was going to open this one. Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay. This is a shot I took a long time ago. But you get a couple things that I wanted to point out in this shot is this was a single long exposure, and it was in the harbor up near the Max Brewer Bridge, just north of Max Brewer Bridge. And you get the streak shot going up. And I don't remember why I was restrained. I'm not sure why. But anyway, here's a perfect example. And you can see by all these streaks from around the moon, you can see that I was up around F16, F18, somewhere in that neighborhood. So you can tell I had a very, very small aperture setting. And that helps also, especially if you got other illumination, illuminating in the middle of the night your foreground. So don't be afraid to bring a flashlight if it's dark out, and do some light painting of your foreground if you have interesting foreground, either just before or just after it launches. But in this case, it's a very, very distorted picture. First of all, you got the rocket taking off almost horizontally, and it doesn't. It goes up, and then it starts to pitch over, and it doesn't go up quite like that. It's because the camera was pointed way up into the air. Unless your camera is perfectly level and your shutter is perpendicular to the earth, if you point your camera up, your shutter is now going to not be perpendicular to the earth. And the way the lens is configured, you're going to get this distortion where especially things on the sides of the image, now this one's cropped, but especially things on the side of the image, I mean, that boat is not leaning over 30 degrees. It's just not, but it's distorted to that degree. So what I always like to do is take a wide enough picture that I can make corrections afterwards. And this is just the one I found. I'm sure I got much better examples, but when you go into Photoshop and you put the little handles on, so, crop handles or whatever you want to call them, and then you hold down your control key. And my apologies to the Apple crowd, because I just don't know it. But the point is, you hold on the control key, click and hold on your mouse, the handle here, and you bring it in. Now look what's happening to all of your boat masts. They're getting straight up and down. Okay. So when you do that, and look at the rocket plume is now going straight up. And I think what happened on this one, I was just I had the camera pointed in the wrong direction. I don't know if I had misidentified a building or something, but that's the reason all this empty space on the right. So you do that, okay? And now you have, look at all your foreground, everything looks normal. If it weren't for this cutoff down here, the streak would look normal. And then when you're done with that, you would just go over here to crop, and you just crop it in, and you have a much better looking shot, because all the masts, and this is just a demo, folks. I realize I don't have the beginning of the launch because I had the camera pointed in the wrong direction for some reason. But look at how much more normal that looks, okay? And so you want to look at any objects in your foreground especially, and look for opportunities to straighten your image so that your foreground image items look normal and don't look completely distorted. So this is just a demo more than anything else, but it's one of the things I see all the time is folks post images and it's enormously distorted foreground because their camera's pointed up in the air. The camera's pointed 20 or 30 degrees up, and they don't even realize it. They don't even see it because they're looking at the streak, and the streak looks cool and everything else. But in the meantime, their picture looks silly because you got sailboat masts that are bent over at 30 degrees and all kinds of things like that. So don't forget to take a wide enough shot that when you make this correction, you're not cutting off like I am here, like I was. I couldn't find a better example on short notice, but that is exactly what you want to do, is you want to make your foreground and make the items in your foreground look normal proportion-wise. So does anybody?
What tool was that? Yeah, this is Mark Poole. What tool did you use to pinch the bottom together?
Oh, okay. I'll back up here. Let's see. I do this. Go by boop, boop. Okay. I take the in Photoshop. Can you see up here in the left the
Yep.
little marching ants thing? Okay. I highlight the entire image, and then just above that I got the little it's a little four-way arrow doodad.
Yeah.
Okay, they call it the move tool, but you click that, and if you look closely, you'll see there's little handles in each of the four corners and on the midpoint. You see the little handles? Okay, what you want to do is you want to take the lower right. In other words, you can see by looking at the image is that the lower right has to come to the left. I could do the same thing by moving the upper right to the right. And as a matter of fact, I'll do that here just so you can see. But the point is that when you want to move this, if you move it like this, the whole thing moves proportionally. You don't want to do that. So to make it move individually, you hold down the control key, okay, on a Windows. You hold down the control key, and then you put your mouse on the little handle, click and hold, and just drag it. And by doing that, you're dragging just that one item. And you can see the result here is going to be just about the same thing. See how the masts are looking straight now?
Yeah.
Okay, now I let go of the mouse, and now I'm going to go over here to the upper left. I'm going to click that off, and then I hit Control D to just get rid of the marching ants. And now I've straightened it out, and I've gotten a different perspective, and in it you can see how the streak just doesn't look normal. So that's why I always do it by grabbing the bottom one and moving it to the left until the sailboat masts look straight up and down. So I grab the bottom one, move it to the left. Okay. And when that is done, you just Control D gets rid of the marching ants. Then I just crop it to whatever I think is the proper crop. And in this one here, I could probably eke a little more out of it, but it doesn't really gain much. So you do that, and now you've got your sailboat masts, or your building, or whatever it is that's in your foreground is not looking distorted. And that's a technique that I use, because otherwise you look at it and the foreground is all distorted whenever you point your camera up. And inversely, if you point your camera down, at your dog running around or whatever it is on the ground that's of interest, and you point your camera down, realize it's going to be distorted, and things on the top of your image are going to converge and point towards the bottom. Okay, when you point your camera up, items in the bottom of your image are going to converge and point towards the top. So either way, unless your camera is perfect, your shutter in your camera, so your camera itself, but your shutter, unless it's perfectly perpendicular to the earth, you're going to induce a little bit of distortion. Most of the time we don't even see it because we're busy looking at the subject. But especially when we're looking at rockets, where we frequently have our camera pointed way up into the sky or at a 30 or 40 degree angle to make sure we get the entire arch. When we take the picture and we go home and it looks great, but then we don't, without even realizing it, we have sailboat masts or other items in the picture that are grossly distorted because your camera was pointed up or down. And so that's how you fix it, at least in Photoshop.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Okay, anybody else have any questions on that? All right, good. I'm going to kill this. I'm not going to save it. And let's see, I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to go back to share screen. And let's see. I already talked about the, oh, I know what I wanted to do. Let me go back to Photoshop. All right, I'm going to go to, no, kill that, cancel that. I am going to go, isn't this fun following me around? I am going to go to here. And I'm just going to show you. Remember that picture I showed you where I took 2 pictures of the launch on the same day? And you had the picture of the Atlas with the smoke. And then right next to it, you had the picture of the SpaceX rocket going up, and it was a bright streak. If you look here, these are all the pictures I took of the Atlas. Okay, and if you went up high enough, you'd see that I got the other one as well. But these are all the pictures I took of the SpaceX Falcon rocket. And see if we can find it here.
Do you bring them into Photoshop as layers?
Yes, I bring them in as layers into Photoshop. I don't know if I can see it here. Oh, that's why. Ha. See a little dot right there in the center? That's the rocket just getting started. That's why all those other pictures were pictures just before the ignition. So that's why I was looking for the rocket. So
Do you bring them in individually, or do you use like the generate or?
Well, I actually, let me go. Let's see where I am here. I'll show you what I do. Okay. I go to, I actually use Lightroom. Does anybody else use Lightroom?
Yes.
Yeah, I use Lightroom too.
All right. I am going to downsize. I am going to downsize, move this out of the way. Walter, please. I'm going to bring in Lightroom just so you can see that, because it's actually much easier to do in Lightroom. Otherwise, you'd have to bring them in as layers individually. Walter.
I think you use the generate, I forget what, I think it's called generate in Photoshop. And you can select them all and bring them all in as one time. I don't know if that's the right one, but it's under the file menu.
Yeah.
Photoshop. You could do it that way too, but I do what you're getting ready to do in Lightroom. So.
Yes. Let me just bring this up here. I'll see if I can find it. Okay, there's, yeah, I don't know if you guys can see that. Okay, that rocket shot right there. Boy, I am maxing out my resources here.
You're not sharing your screen.
Oh, no wonder you can't see it. Thank you for that. That's not what I want to do. Share screen. I wanted to go to. That one. Okay, So here I am in Lightroom. There's the picture that I'm talking about, more or less. And that is close to the finished product. And these are pictures I took, by the way, of the Falcon, the Atlas in flight. And this was, as I mentioned before, it was just before sunrise. So as the rocket flew up into the sky, the red, very warm sunrise color was lighting the exhaust plume. And so that's why you get a red plume for a while before it gets high enough that it's into the pure sunlight and it turns white again. So anyway, I am going to come down here. You know what? Did I delete these? I may have deleted these. I deleted these, darn it. Okay. Well, I deleted them from my Lightroom catalog. That's why I'm not seeing them there. So I will have to go back and go to, this is going to be a very, very basic thing, but I will try and see what I can do here. And okay. Can I open these in layers from here? Does anybody know? I don't know. Or they just open as individual pictures? I don't know, actually. Let's just open them. All right. Because this is just a demonstration. I'm not trying to do everything perfect here. Is everybody still with me?
We are.
Yeah, we're still here. I think if
Yep.
Yeah, Gordy, this is Mark Poole. The way to load all those at once is under File, Scripts,
File script.
Scripts,
keep
keep
going.
going down
Okay.
right there. And now almost at the bottom, load files into Stack.
yeah,
Load
there you
files
go.
into
That's it.
Oh, all right.
That's it. That's it.
And now I can browse and find them.
Browse and find them.
And it brings them all in as a layer.
Got it. See, I knew you folks would show me how to do this. I just have to find them now. Hang on. I have 32 gigabytes of RAM in this thing, and I thought I was sitting pretty, but it's I'm pretty much maxing it out at this point, I'm afraid. Okay, there we go. Well, and it doesn't help that I'm loading raw files too. It's all right. There's one. I'm going to pick some number down the road. There's one. Okay. Okay. Okay, and if you look off to the right, you'll see them loading as layers. That's what I always load from Lightroom, so I'm not used to doing this, but anyway. So the base shot that I took on this one, again, I used about 1/3 or 2/3 below what the camera metered, because all I'm interested in is the flame of the rocket. That's really all I'm interested in. And it's not going to change. It's so bright at this distance. This is about 4 miles, 5 miles. It's so bright at this distance that when you merge and lighten, you'll get a streak. So we're almost there, boys and girls.
So Gordy, while we're waiting,
Yes.
you're taking maybe these at 125th of the second.
Yeah, I'd have to look, but probably somewhere in that neighborhood, yes.
And then are you using intervalometer to do that, to do them back to back, or how are you getting them up? So
You know, I'm glad you brought that up. I have an intervalometer, an external one that plugs into the side of my camera, and I can press and lock it. So I set my camera to multiple exposures, right? So, you know, what you would normally hold down the shutter and it'll just keep firing.
Right.
Set it to that setting, and then I put the intervalometer in, and I can push the intervalometer, the exposure button, and then it locks. So I can push and lock. And so then I get my other camera out with the telephoto zoom and take pictures of the rocket while it sits there and just cranks. So anyway, so let's see what we got here. 93, 92. Okay. So we have them all up like this, right? On the right. So I am going to use that bottom one as my base shot. It doesn't matter here because I don't have anything in particular in front, but I'm going to highlight everything except the bottom one using the shift click business. Then I'm going to go up here to right above that where it's got blend mode, and I hit blend mode lighten. And there's a perfect example of where there was a gap. Okay, so I zoom in and I now have a gap. And so what I would do is take the clone brush and then I merge these together, by the way. Merge layers. So now I have just one layer. Now I take the clone brush and I can go in here and everything looks good. So I can just do a quick clone using whatever overlap you want to use. And you can see that this is a time-consuming operation, especially when you are shooting, 120 or so shots for 2 minutes. You can very easily get yourself bogged down for 2 hours doing this after the launch to get it just right. But you can see there, you got a rocket, you got a streak. And if I had loaded more images, I would have been able to keep that streak all the way down to the launch pad. And so then I took this, overlaid it on the other shot where I had the sunrise coming up, and used the blend mode of lighten. And so that's how I got this streak to overlay on top of the Atlas streak, which was the smoke shot. And I wound up with 2 pictures, 2 rocket launches in the same picture. So that's how I do it. And I think that was the gist of what folks wanted to know, is that's how it's done. All right, I'm going to kill this. Don't need it. Stop sharing. What else? Anybody have any other questions? I'm sure there's a lot. I'm going to bring up something here.
You asked a question about photo of the launch.
About what?
I intend just take a picture of the launch.
Yes.
And my daughter's a NASA engineer, so she's got a pass, but I don't know how close I'm going to be. But I intend to use my F100 to 500.
Yeah.
What would you suggest? Shutter speed, 1,000?
No less than that. I would go 1250 or 1600. What camera do you have?
The R5.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Go to 1250 or to 1600, somewhere like that. And I would put your if you're using your 100 to 500, you're going to be at 7.1. So I would put auto ISO, and depending on what the day looks like, you may want to set your exposure correction up, 1/3 of a 1/3 of a stop, just to make it just slightly brighter.
I was thinking, close it down, a stop or stop and a half.
No, not that much. 1/3 of a stop. 1/3 of a stop. You're
And the exposure compensation, just a third of a stop.
a third of a stop. Yep. But that, again, that you may want to brighten it up a little bit if you got dark clouds. So take a look at what you're using. If you got a bright blue sky, you probably want to open it up so you get a little bit more exposure, because the camera's going to expose for the bright blue sky, and so you want the rocket to look plenty white. So you may want to be. I generally don't move that more than 1/3 of a stop, and it just depends on what the background is giving me. If it's a cloudy or a dark background, and I know I want to brighten it up a little, I'll brighten it up by 1/3 of a stop. If it's overall a really bright image, like with bright clouds and so on, you might want to darken it just a 1/3 of a stop. I very rarely use it more than a 1/3 of a stop either direction.
Okay, thank you.
Oh yeah, this is, for those who don't have it, I highly recommend it. It's called Photographer's Ephemeris or Photo Ephemeris, and you can take and figure out for any given day. This is today. It'll tell you where the sunrise is, where the sunset is, where the moonrise is, where the moonset is, and it'll tell you where the moon is for whatever time you have on your timeline. It's a 24-hour timeline. You can see where the sun and the moon are chasing themselves around. And then it also allows you to put a pin in, and I have that pin set there. You can set your pin wherever you want. And that is helpful if you're doing some planning. Like if you know the rocket's going to be going up a 0.45 trajectory over here. So we'll put this at 0.45 or so. And you can read that down here. You can put the rocket trajectory in there, 0.45, pretty close. So now you know exactly where the rocket's going to go. And so you can say, well, I definitely don't want to be over in this area, because then I'm going to be getting just a tail chase. I want to be over here to the left or over here to the right, so I can get the hook in the rocket, so I can get that arch. And the closer you are to, like if I was to go up here, north of in the Canaveral Wildlife Area, the closer I am to 90 degrees to this, the more pronounced that arch is going to be. Okay, I think I showed you the arch where it went way across from right to left, all the way across. That's because I was way up here, and the rocket was going, and so I'm looking from the 90 degrees to the course of the rocket. Then if I'm over in this area, if I was to be down here, if I was actually at my condo, by the way, is right about here. See where that number 1 is? Right about there. If I was right here, just about at my condo, I would see an extreme tail chase on this particular rocket launch. So I would say to myself, don't want to hang around here. Let's go up to Shiloh's and watch from there or whatever. So it helps you plan that out. And I think I try and tell everyone during our monthly meetings, the rocket launch is coming up, what the azimuth is going to be, just for that very reason. So you can plan this type of planning. So if I was shooting this, if it was a pure nighttime streak shot, if I was shooting this from up here just north of the Max Brewer Bridge in Titusville, I would probably shoot that at f/16, f/100, f/16, and then lock the shutter for. And again, the remote trigger you talked about a little while ago, if you set it at manual, or at bulb rather, you set it at bulb, set your f-stop at 16, and set your ISO at 100, press and lock and hold, and you'll get a perfect streak shot, and it'll be not 90 degrees, but it'll be a definite arch. It'll be arched from lower right to upper left as it goes by. And if I was to be shooting from down here on the Cape, or down here in the port. If I was down, perfect time to talk about that. If I was down here in the port, look at what I've got. I've got a very, very shallow difference between my line of sight and the rocket path. So that's going to give me that streak shot that's got a very, very narrow, hardly any arch to it at all. So that's the kind of thing that you should be looking at when you're doing planning.
Gordon, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
The Artemis shot this
Yes.
Monday, which way, what kind of trajectory is that going to have?
Of course you would ask that.
Where should I be? Not with those 100,000 people.
Here's the problem with the Artemis shot, because they're trying to hit the moon.
Yeah,
Their window is 8:33 in the morning to 10:33. If they launch at 8:33, they go this way. If they go off at 8:35, they go this way. If they go off at 8:37, they go this way. If they go off at 8:40, they go this way. In other words, their azimuth is completely dependent on when in the window they launch. And I don't know the exact azimuths, but I think the earliest part of the azimuth, it's going to be about a 0.45 or so, something like this. And at the very, like if they go at the very end of their window, 10:30-ish, I think it's going to be kind of like where this yellow line is, much more to the east.
I hope to go later because I'm down this way.
Yeah, you'll get a good shot if you were down south and it's later in the window. You'll get a good shot going that way.
Okay.
But that's a pretty rare exception. Normally, you got a pretty good idea what the azimuth is going to be, and they'll tell you that. They'll tell me that, and I pass it on to you guys. And it's not a secret. There's websites you can go find that information. But because they're trying to hit the moon, and they can't move the moon to hit the rocket, they can't, and nothing much they can do with that. They've got to make the rocket hit the moon. So they have a limited number of azimuths based on where in the window they're launching. So, but that's rare to have that. Okay, let's see. What other things do we want to talk about? I think that was about it. I know I'm probably missing a lot of stuff.
Well, since you mentioned websites,
Yeah.
Is there a good website to get the azimuths from?
Uh,
I don't think I've ever seen one that has listed it like that.
I
But I also
have-
haven't looked for it.
Yeah, I have seen it. Here's the thing, because I get that information readily. I just make a phone call. I don't go looking at websites for that information because I can get it anytime I want. So I don't know, but I do know, I do remember seeing a website one time where if you dove down a layer or two deep for a particular, you'd highlight a launch, and then there was some little box that says launch details or something. You could go in there and it would tell you that.
It's on that the YouTube that you did, the Zoom you did before for the night launches. It's on that video.
Oh, the website is?
Space Launch Now.
That might be it.
I think it's spacelaunchnow.me.
Mhm.
It's the website, and then like you said, you highlight the launch you want, and then you go into telemetry. It's a little blue box. And you click on telemetry.
There you go. I knew it was out there. But I never go there, so I didn't remember. I don't remember where it was.
Yeah, there's another one called flightclub.io. And they have a subscription plan as well for 3 different tiers. And they'll even give you, like the 3D Google Earth view that you can fly through, and it'll map the launch azimuth and everything, in a 3D view, so you can, zoom all around and really plan your shot out if you want to. And it'll show overlay it, with the sun and the moon locations and all that. So if you want to, get a shot of a rocket crossing in front of the moon, you can use that for all your shot planning as well.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I didn't mention, but on when you're looking at this particular tool, you know what the moon is doing at any given time. For example, if I was to look at today, you'd see that the moon is a waning moon, 0.12%. Well, that's pretty much nothing, okay? But if I was to go and say, what's it going to be doing on September 10th, during the launch on September 10th, you'll notice that the moon is 99%. So it's just about a full moon. So in that case, you may want to, we'll take this for example here. Let's say the launch is at 11 p.m. I'm just making this up. Let's say the launch is at 11 p.m. Okay, so I moved the little slider over here, and you can see this line right here. Okay, that's where the moon is at 11 p.m. It's at 120 degrees, measured from north, 120 degrees, and at 35 degrees above the horizon, and it's a 99% moon. Okay, so if you wanted to get this, maximize the arch in this particular streak, and you parked yourself over here, that moon is going to blow it out. It's going to look like that one shot I showed you. It's going to be an egg shape at best, and it's going to blow it out. So that's another way you can use this particular tool to see what your planning is all about. If I was shooting this scenario on that date, I would come down and shoot from somewhere down here, some in this general direction where I'm not shooting into the moon. And then I'll get the, that'd be a perfect time to go at Port Canaveral and get another picture of grills or something like that in the foreground. Getting the shot, you're going to get some arch, not an exaggerated arch, but you're going to get some arch in there. And the moon is not going to be smack dab in the middle of your exposure. So that's another way to use this particular tool. And I use this all the time. So anyway, what else? Anybody else got questions out there on streak shots and whatnot?
How about the shot tomorrow if it goes up? What's it doing?
It's going to be a new moon, so there's almost no moon. It's going up about 0.45, like I showed you, and the window opens at 9:53 or something. But I'm here to tell you that the actual T0, the first T0 is 10:22, and then the second T0 is like 11:03 or something like that. But anyway, it's 10:22, so that's when you're going to likely see it. Now there's going to be clouds and whatnot around tomorrow, so I'm not overly optimistic on.
Doesn't look like it.
Well, living along the shoreline, along the ocean shore, depending on the wind direction, sometimes you can get clear skies right above the rocket all the way out to sea. And, meanwhile, there's a thunderstorm over there on US 1. So it's really flaky when you're in this very localized weather pattern that you can get along the shoreline here, highly dependent upon wind flow and pressure gradients and stuff like that. So it's not terribly unusual to not exactly get the forecast that the weather guessers are giving you. So I know tomorrow I'm going out to the Cape, and I'm going to go down at the south end of the Cape where we have a Redstone rocket on display in the museum, and I'm going to try and get a streak shot so that the rocket goes up and then arches over the top of the Redstone rocket, and then I'm going to try and light paint the Redstone rocket so it'll look cool. Because that's where Alan Shepard launched into space in '61. What else? Anybody? Oh, let me talk about a couple things. Good thing I made a mental note here. Does everybody remember the shuttles? When the shuttle lit, it went, and I mean it went fast. Remember how fast the shuttles went? It was a fast rocket, and that's because it has those two great big huge solid rocket motor boosters on each side. Well, I'm here to tell you that this Artemis is going to be just as fast as the shuttle, or just about as fast as the shuttle, because it's got the same two solid rocket boosters on the side of the tank. So you can expect that rocket to really go quickly. The SpaceX rockets go a lot more slowly because they're just strictly liquid fuel. The Atlases, depending on whether they put solids on them or not, it's either going to be fast or slow. So you look at the configuration of the Atlas and it'll tell you, if you go to one of those websites, it'll say, this is an Atlas, 531 or something. And you go, what the hell is that? Well, 5 means it's a 5-meter fairing. 3 means there's 3 solid rocket boosters. 1 means there's a single engine on the second stage. That's what that code means, okay? So whatever the second number is will tell you how many solid rocket motors are going to be boosting it. And if it has more than 1, if it has 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, that thing is going to scoot like a scalded rabbit because that's a lot of impulse on those solid rocket motors, okay? So when you see a rocket with solid rocket motors, expect it to go fast. And so that translates into how fast are you going to try and catch the daytime streak shots? And you're likely to have, so if you have a way to set your camera to take your exposures faster, you'd want to set that. And the downside is you get a lot more exposures that you have to layer. But if you're taking it 10 or 12 frames per second as opposed to 4 or 5 frames per second, it'll make all the difference in the world. So if it's got solids like the SLS has solids or Atlas has solids from time to time, set your camera shutter exposure pace at a faster pace. If everybody kind of follows me on that, because the rocket's going to go through the air and accelerate up much faster.
So at least 10, maybe 10 per second?
Oh, for the SLS, yeah, if you can. I mean, whatever the fastest your camera will go.
Okay.
I have a camera that'll go at 20. I don't want to do 20. I would probably not do that, but I would definitely go up in the 8, 10, 12 range if I could.
Okay.
And if your camera can't do that, just set it as fast as it'll go. And then just realize that you may get more gaps in the frames where you have to light paint it in. Okay, what else? Anybody?
Well, Gordy, after everybody leaves, I'd like to have you walk me through that edit that we tried. I just tried it on Photoshop and I failed, so I'm missing something.
Oh, okay, sure. We can do that. We can do it again right now if you want. I'll just stop recording but if anybody else wants to hang around and watch it, we can do that.
I did drop a link in the chat to the flightclub.io for the launch tomorrow night. If anybody wants to look and see the telemetry and visualization and
Okay.
kind of a Google Earth 3D view
Yeah.
that you drag around.
Did you look at that? Was I right? Is it about a 043 or so?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. A lot of this stuff is up here, and I pluck it out as I need it. So every once in a while, SpaceX throws me a curveball. No, say it isn't true. So anyway, okay, does anybody else have anything for the general crowd? And I'll stop recording. Anybody?
Yeah, I've got a question about listening to the launch audio live. I'm fairly new. I've been trying to do it YouTube, but on my phone, as soon as the phone goes to sleep, YouTube stops, so what do y'all use to listen to the launch live?
Well, I will tell you that almost anything you get, unless you have a radio and are picking up the actual RF, you're not going to get it truly live. Some will be a 6, 7, 8 second delay, and it's just a product of having to take the audio that they're getting from NASA or whoever and pumping it through their system and back out over the internet and so on. Sometimes it's as much as 30 seconds or more delayed. So live is kind of a relative term. It's live in the sense that it's not you're not hearing a recording, but it's not live in the sense that it's usually there's some sort of delay. If you ever called a talk show, you're talking on the phone and you hang up, and then after you hang up, you hear 15 seconds later what you just said. So it's kind of the same way. So I don't, the best way to do that, in my opinion, is just to set your watch. So you know exactly when they say T minus 5 seconds, and you have your watch set for, and check it against your computer. That's close enough. But if they say it's going to go up at, it's 10:22 in some number of seconds, just watch your watch and then you'll know it's coming. But anything that you're going to be listening to, especially like YouTube or any of those, you're almost always going to have some amount of delay.
Okay, thanks.
I put the link to the Space Launch Now website in there too.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
Yeah, either one. They're both, except Space Launch Now doesn't have the 3D effect. It just tells you when the launch is and you can find the telemetry.
Yeah, the link for their telemetry goes to flightclub.io. So it
Is that
goes
what
right back
happened?
to the same site. Yep.
All right. I don't spend as much time on, chasing around those websites because I see it every day live and I just walk over and talk to the guy who's doing it. So it's not, it's not something I just generally follow. But anyway, let's see. Going once, going twice. Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to stop the recording. Thanks everybody on the recording world for joining us, and we'll see you at the next meeting, which is in September 6th, I believe, and see you later.